And I also have a passion for Gwinnett County. I grew up here. I want to see our county prosper. I want to see our county become inclusive. I want to see our county become leaders in regional transportation and doing the types of thing that this county needs to do.
You're listening to Peachtree Corners Life, a weekly online radio show sharing ideas, opinions, and news about the city of Peachtree Corners. Now, your host, Rico Figliolini.
Everyone, this is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. Appreciate you guys joining us. In the city of Peachtree Corners, we're doing our podcast as usual, socially safe, not in the studio that we normally would be, like Atlanta Tech Park, where we've been doing a lot of podcasts before COVID-19 hit. We have a good special guest today. We're going to be discussing a bit about politics in Gwinnett County. But before we get there, I do want to just say thank you to our sponsor, Hargrave Fiber. They've been a sponsor of the family of podcasts that we do, not only Peachtree Corners Life and Capitalist Sage, but the other shows that we do as well. So I want to say thank you to them. You can find out more information about Hargrave Fiber, which is a leading fiber optic company in the Southeast. They provide fiber cable. They're not the cable guy. They're not Comcast. They're not AT&T. They're right in your community. When they come into Peachtree Corners or Conyers or Valdosta, they are right in there. Offices there. You don't call up an 800 number that's going to be like somewhere in La La Land. Your tech support's right in your community. They're a great place. They provide not only the consumer side, but the business side, which is what HargraveFiber.com does. So check them out. They have 90-day free internet connection available, and also some tools that can get you online, free tools that can help you do your work online and teleworking. If you're getting challenges somewhere else, they're the guys to go to. HargraveFiber.com. So check them out. Now, to our guest, Lee Thompson. Lee, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
No, I appreciate you coming out. I know coming out. See, everyone's out here doing campaigning in the virtual world, right?
That's right. Well, I walked down the hall to another room, so
that's funny. They set you up, and you could just keep going. Was it Biden that was doing the virtual tour? I was wondering how he was going to do that from the basement, but it's amazing. Everyone's Zooming. Is that that's a new thing for you, or not?
Well, it certainly was before this pandemic started. But now that we've been doing that, I've been, I think, in 3 or 4 city council meetings that way. I've been in 3 or 4 forums that way. So done it quite a bit now.
Cool. So for those that don't know Lee Thompson, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Obviously, I think there's 6 or 7 Democratic candidates running in the primary?
There's 5 Democrats and 3 Republicans.
Okay, 5 Democrats. Okay, cool. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and stuff.
Sure. I'm a lifelong resident of Gwinnett County. Grew up in Lawrenceville. Attended Central Gwinnett High School. After that, I obtained a degree, undergraduate degree from Mercer University. I have a law degree from the University of Georgia Law School. I have lived in Lawrenceville throughout my life and have practiced law in Lawrenceville since 1981. Started practicing law in 1981. For the vast majority of that time, our firm has been specialist in local government law. I've been the city attorney for the city of Sugar Hill, the city of Duluth, the city of Grayson, the city of Lawrenceville. We have in the past also served for Snellville and the city of Auburn. And we also represent the Gwinnett County Board of Education. And we've represented that entity since 1983. And so we've seen a lot of changes over the years. And so that's what I've done for a living my entire career. I'm also active in the community. I was actually in the first class of Leadership Gwinnett. That was in 1985 and 1986. I was in my late 20s and was selected to that class of Leadership Gwinnett. I have been active in the Democratic Party. I've been on the executive committee of the Gwinnett Democratic Party for over 30 years. I've been on the state Democratic Party committee for over 20 years. And I've been in a number of civic organizations. I actually was one of the founding members of the Gwinnett Tech Foundation, and was also a founding member of the Central Gwinnett Cluster Foundation, and serve on the board of directors of the Justice Center of Atlanta, which is a nonprofit organization that provides mediation service and provides mediation training for people all over the United States.
That's interesting. I mean, me coming from New York, it's all Democrats up in the city of New York, unless you were in Staten Island and Long Island, then there were Republicans. So there was never a Republican to be found in the boroughs, right? And when I moved down here in 95, if being a Democrat in Gwinnett County, you were lonesome. So we never crossed paths that way. I ended up becoming a Reagan Republican or Reagan Democrat, however they call it. But the Republican Party, for the most part, was what the county ran on, right? During the most of the years, but when I moved here in 95, it seemed that way.
Well, certainly since 95, that has been true. Prior to that, actually, when I was in college and then a young lawyer in politics, there were actually a lot of Democrats in office here in Gwinnett County. I actually was the campaign manager for Bartow Jenkins, who was the last Democrat to serve on the Gwinnett County Commission before Ben Koo and Marlene Foscue were elected last year. I was his campaign manager. I also worked on the campaign staff of Ed Jenkins, who was a Democratic congressman who represented the county up until, I believe it was 1992. The Republicans swept most of the county offices in 1984. And so since that time, most of the county-wide offices have been held by Republicans.
I think that was Gingrich along that time, maybe? Somewhere along, right? But politics has changed in the county. I mean, I've seen it since 95, since I moved here. Urbanized. Gwinnett's become more urbanized, right? A lot more minorities. Very different from the way it was in the mid-late 90s, I think. More democratic. Well, at least more democratic leaning, maybe not democratic voters, but we're getting there, it seems, right? It's taken a couple of decades. Are you finding it easier to meet more Democrats along the way of different types of Democrats? There's Asians, there's African Americans. I mean, it's a big potpourri of ethnicity in Gwinnett County, right?
It is, and definitely. I've seen the entire change. I actually grew up in Gwinnett County, so I was going to school in the 70s in Gwinnett County when it was basically a rural community. My grandparents lived out on Pleasant Hill Road, which at that time had a lot of farms and even some dairies on it. So I've seen it change from a rural community to a suburban community and now to an urban community. It's become much more diverse. It's one of the most diverse counties in the United States at this point. And that's been a very good thing. And it has been good for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has grown in the last years. I was actually elected as state representative in 2008 when President Obama got elected. I ran against a 3-term incumbent here in Lawrenceville, was able to win that seat in 2008. I then lost it in 2010 when the Republicans swept in the statewide races, but then have remained active in the party. And I've seen, actually, they split my old seat up into 6 different districts in the Lawrenceville area. And I was happy that by this last 2018 election, 4 of those 6 seats that have parts of my old district are now held by Democrats.
Wow. It has changed a lot, it seems. So politics has changed a bit too, right? Since even a decade ago. I mean, we're more concerned about transportation coming in. I've seen more challenges on that. Marta wants to be able to come in, although it was recently defeated. COVID-19 has also opened up a lot of different other challenges as well. So what do you find with, what challenges do you think a county chairman will have coming into office, considering reduced revenue that's happening because of COVID-19 and the health issues? So what challenges will an elected official, county commissioner, county chair face when they take office?
Well, they're going to face a lot of issues. They're going to face the issues that they already had, which are transportation, how to deal with transportation, how to deal with land use planning and infrastructure and all of the issues that were already there. But they're now going to be facing that, having to deal with probably substantially reduced revenues. One of the things that we've already seen is the effect on businesses, obviously, with restaurants being closed, with a number of retail businesses being closed, that we've had a reduction in sales tax revenue. And that sales tax revenue is probably going to continue to be reduced. Sales tax revenue in Gwinnett County is mainly used for the special purpose local option sales tax to fund capital projects. So what is probably going to happen is we're probably going to have to see how long that reduced sales tax revenue goes on and see if there's going to be enough money to fund the projects that were planned out for this SPLOST in the last referendum. And see if we're not able to fund those projects, which projects are we going to put priority on and which projects are going to have to be delayed or which projects where we may have to come up with a different funding source. We also really don't know yet how this is going to affect other revenue sources. When I was in the state legislature, I went in January of 2009, a few months after the economic collapse of 2008. And I found at that time the state was often trying to balance the budget by cutting funds that it was providing to local governments. And so the state hasn't even adopted its budget for the coming fiscal year, which starts July 1. So we don't have any idea if the state is going to be cutting back county funds. And so we'll just have to kind of wait and see the ultimate effect this has. But obviously it's going to change planning, and we're going to have to be very strategic in our financial planning next year once we see how much we are actually affected by this.
I think I just heard something about the governor's office saying to all the departments about cutting back 15% across the board or something along those lines.
That's correct. I think they sent out a memo to ask them to cut their budgets by 14%.
Yeah, across the board, no matter if they don't. Yeah,
across the board, everything. When they had originally asked them to cut 6% or 4%, I believe it was earlier, there were certain places that were exempted, like education and other areas. As I understand it from this last memo, there are no exemptions.
So how does the county work hand in hand with education, for example, in other areas within the county? Obviously, school kids are home. They're home through the summer. They should be coming back in the fall if things go well. School buses have to run, school lunches. There's other services the county provides separate. I mean, obviously, county commission doesn't deal with the school board per se, but there's auxiliary services that have to be provided that the county coordinates, right, with the school system, with the health department.
They do. And of course, as I said, our firm represents the Gwinnett County Board of Education. So we see it from the education side. And obviously the decisions about policy and how to operate schools are all done by a separate elected body, separate than the county commission. They're done by the school board and the superintendent of schools. But yes, there's coordination that has to go on between transportation projects that provide intersection improvements and sidewalk improvements and those types of things around schools. And obviously, going on now, the school system has continued to deliver lunches, despite the fact that it has children who are not in school. For Title I schools, they have continued to provide lunches to those individuals. When we get to the summer and they may not have those lunches, or if we face something in the fall where people may not be able to go back to school, that's obviously an issue that we all have to deal with. And all the I'm very close. My office is very close to the Lawrenceville Co-op. They give out food on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. During the week of spring break, the line from the Lawrenceville Co-op extended back over 2 blocks of people waiting to get in to pick up food that week. So that's a real issue where we have to deal with our social services and our health and human resources divisions of the county have to step in and try and help on some of those issues.
Now, property taxes is another issue too, I'd imagine. Property tax has to be paid towards the end of the year and stuff. Do you think that there may be challenges there Or are we looking at not a second wave second wave of economic impact even, but are we looking at the county have challenges there then, because that would affect budget as well?
It would, and we could be looking at that. I think it may be a little bit too early to tell that for sure. We're going to have to see how drastic this economic downturn is from the virus. If it lasts long enough and we begin to have people having evictions, we begin to have people moving out of buildings and leaving the buildings vacant. All of those things obviously can have a downturn on property values and can affect property taxes. I don't know if we'll see it so much this year in the property taxes because those property values were really set at the beginning of the year in January, unless we see people who are not able to pay their bills. We may see Gwinnett County actually has a very high collection rate on their property tax bills. So it'll be interesting to see if that goes down this fall when those property taxes actually come due.
When Governor Kemp back in, I think it was April 21st or somewhere around there, mid-April, decided to start opening up the state slowly. I don't know if it was slowly, but he announced that it's going to open up. The rules, the executive order he placed, said, sure, salons, hair salons, nail places, they can open up, but there were no, obviously anyone that looked at that and looked at the CDC guidance would be like, you can't open these things up. I know that you were sort of opposed to the opening up of the state at that point. How do you see it coming along now? I mean, how do you feel about the opening and the continued opening right now? Summer camps, for example, not overnight camps, but summer camps are going to be allowed. The movement to 10 persons in a group and stuff like that. How do you see that affecting Gwinnett County? Are you for that? What's your take on that?
I'm still concerned about it. I had two problems when Governor Kemp did that. I put out a short statement about that when he did it. The first was that I thought it was a little bit too early for some of the reasons you just cited. There were some obvious businesses in there that you really couldn't keep social distancing, that it was difficult for them to abide by the guidelines. Secondly, the issue of that every time the governor has put out an order, he's preempted any kind of local action. So in other words, if the city of Atlanta wants to do something differently, or Gwinnett County, a county of almost 1 million people, thinks it needs to have different rules than a county in South Georgia that has 20,000 people, he preempted any ability to do that. And I found that disturbing. I hope we're not going to see an uptick in the second wave of the virus. I think it's a little bit too early to see, to know that. I have been impressed by people, I think, showing common sense. And a lot of people just saying, I'm not comfortable going in and sitting in a restaurant right now. I'm still going to pick up, or I'm not comfortable going to a particular area. And the people who have opened up, at least some, hair salons, one-person salons where they say, okay, I'll take one person at a time.
Right.
I'll use disposable capes. I'll disinfect everything after this person leaves. Everybody wears masks and gloves while they're in here. So I have been pleasantly surprised by some of the common sense I've seen of people trying to make sure that they apply common sense to the openings that they have done.
It's interesting. I've been out there a little bit. I've been doing a lot of Instacart ordering. So Costco deliveries, Publix deliveries, not Ingles. But when I do go out there, though, it's interesting. Mix of different things, right? I see a lot of people with masks, and then at some places I see no one with masks.
That's true.
So I just, and I think my fear is that the longer we do this, the more lax people become, because that's just the nature of, I think, people, right?
So I would agree with your comments. I've seen the same thing. When we have people come into our office, we still have our doors locked. We let people come in as they need to for a specific to sign some papers or something. We wear masks. We've asked people to wear masks. Some people do, some people don't. Yeah.
Well, And moving forward, obviously, I think business has to start moving at some point. Intelligently, yes, because people need to make money. They have to pay their bills. I think everyone starts feeling the hurt at some point, individuals as well as business owners. And also opportunities been found because some people figure they don't need that 10,000 square foot office. They could use 2,000 square feet and everyone could be, out there doing Zooming, and stuff. That could have a bad effect on commercial real estate in the country. There's that. There's also, transportation. I'm sure MARTA is going to come back up again. I don't know when the cycle is. Maybe even in November if there's something on the ballot, I guess. How do you feel about MARTA coming back or transportation along those lines? Is that something you would be welcoming? And how would that be affected? How can we do that maybe with even limited budgets?
Yes, it's something I would actually welcome. I've actually lived here long enough that I voted for the MARTA referendum in 1990 when it came along and was defeated in 1990. I voted for a MARTA referendum last year when the referendum came up. I think it needs to be put back on the ballot. I think it was unfortunate that it was put on the March ballot rather than the November ballot at the last vote. I think that was done for purely partisan politics, and that was a sad thing. It is something that we need. We need public transportation, and we need to do it because what that referendum actually provides is a 1 cent sales tax that's going to last for about 30 years that will provide a guaranteed funding mechanism for transportation. And while we might differ a little bit on the plans and which plan's the better plan and what we should have, I hope that we don't try and wait for the perfect plan before we get that funding source in place, because we need to put the funding source in place and get some type of public transportation going in this county. When I was a state representative, I also supported the T-SPLOST bill. It wasn't a perfect bill. I didn't like it, but I voted for it, and I'd hoped the county would vote for it in 2010. Unfortunately, we didn't, and now we saw it was another 10 years before we got anything else on the referendum. So the longer we put these things off, the less money we have going toward transportation over the years.
Yeah, I think I agree with you to a degree. I mean, the T-SPLOST is a little different, though, because you could always adjust that budget where that money goes to some degree, whereas the larger transportation plan might be different, right? Heavy rail versus light rail. Where are you going to put the transportation hubs? I mean, some of those things can be decided later, obviously, but there's always a plan that people look at initially. I think that was why that plan failed, as well as being politically put into the wrong month to be voted on. So I agree with you there. That just killed it because that was just dumb, I think. But it was made on purpose to be defeated, I think, at that point. But anyway, their COVID-19 is actually qualifying everything we talk about now. Transportation. Are we going to be doing that type of thing? How do we continue development, and providing affordable housing? I'm assuming that, as any Democrat, I don't know if you're progressive or more conservative, but how do you feel about affordable housing when it comes to further development in the county? Do you feel that it has to be regulated in there, incentivized? How do you feel about that as far as people being able to afford to live in a place where they're working?
Well, I think it is a demand that we have to respond to in the county, and it should be a high priority of providing affordable housing and workforce housing. I've actually been involved in a project in downtown Lawrenceville as the city attorney that I think provided a good example of how we might do some things. The city of Lawrenceville took about 30 acres near its center and is actually redeveloping that for a number of mixed uses. It's apartments, condominiums, single family, retail, restaurants. As part of that, the development actually wiped out some old public housing that was built in the 50s and 60s. And what Lawrenceville did was part of that plan is take part of the money that came from the development of that. And we actually built, I think they lost 30 some odd units of public housing. They actually built 40 some odd units of new housing, and relocated those people as part of the project. They also have several projects that their housing authority has done where they've been mixing projects where there's affordable supplemented housing being mixed in with regular market rate housing. And so there are a lot of creative ways to do this. And I think we've got to continue to look at those creative ways, engage the private sector in doing that, and work along with our public sector and our housing authorities and our other authorities that we have that can provide the type of housing we need.
Okay. What about immigration and the policies that are right now in place, like programs like 287G and, the impacts that has on the immigrant population? Where do you stand on that issue?
I think that's a bad program. I actually put out you can go to my website and my Facebook page. I think I actually put something up on Facebook in like August of last year when they were having some of the hearings and discussion about that. That is a program that's bad for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's bad economically. We spend about $3 million a year on that program, and we don't get any substantial return from it, I think. And the second is it's bad from a psychological standpoint. It sends a bad message to our immigrant community in saying that I think it leads to profiling. I think it leads to a negative feeling on the immigrant community that they're being discriminated against, and I think they are being very often as a result of that program. And so I think we need to get rid of the program. I think we also need to make sure that the programs that we put into effect in Gwinnett County are welcoming and inclusive programs. And I can actually tell you a story. When I was a state representative back in 2009 and 2010, I actually got complaints about some of law enforcement running roadblocks near churches that were having Spanish Mass or a Haitian community. And I think that was a direct result of 287G types of programs back as long ago as 10, 12 years ago. So.
Well, I know a lot of I've interviewed, I think, 2 sheriff's candidates that are running for Gwinnett County, and they both obviously want to stop the 287G program.
Right. And I would say the sheriff has the most control over that program. And so I think electing one of these good Democratic candidates we've got for sheriff would go a long way towards stopping that program.
Do you have a particular candidate you favor?
I actually do.
Do you? Okay.
You can check their financial records and see which one I gave money to. So.
All right, sounds good. Talking about financial records, we're heading towards the end of our time together, so I wanted to hit on ethics and transparency, which is on your website.
It is.
And, Gwinnett County government for a long time, I'm sure. I was on the planning commission for 3 years, I think, under Bert Nasuti, when he was commissioner, representing this area. And although I never was personally involved or seen any ethics issues, you always heard things, that might have fell along the border a little bit of someone rezoning a place, 100 acres, then flipping the property to a developer all of a sudden that's going to develop that. So a lot of farmers became millionaires over in the early 90s and late 80s, and even going into the late 90s a little bit because of things like that. And I'm sure there was even one county commissioner, I won't name him, that was connected directly to developers and ended up having to give up a seat and was prosecuted at some point. But, things like that happen in politics. I don't think anyone's naive to think things like that doesn't happen on a regular basis. What would you change so then there would be more transparency and more honesty may be brought to the process? What could we do there?
Sure. Well, the first thing is you need to enforce the rules that exist. There are ethics rules that exist for both politicians to disclose their personal financial disclosure statements and their who's giving them campaign contributions, all those things. People need to comply with those. They need to file them on a timely basis, and they need to file them and be open about that. Second thing is we actually need to, I believe, revise our internal processes in the county about how zonings are handled. One of the things that the ethics statutes say is that if somebody is an applicant in a zoning, they're supposed to disclose whether they've given campaign contributions to someone within a certain time period. Well, if you come up and you're going to buy a piece of property and rezone it, and you put it in an LLC that's never existed before,
right,
that's never owns anything other than that piece of property, obviously you've never given any campaign contributions. But it could be owned by 5 people who've given lots of campaign contributions. And that's circumventing those rules and regulations. And we just need to, that would be very simple to just make you disclose certain things when you file applications. Make sure you know who the applicant is. Make sure you know who the owner is. Make sure you have the types of disclosure that needs to be done. And so I would certainly push for those types of rules changes in our zoning process.
Is that something that has to be voted on, or is that something a county commission chair can cross the board, like an executive order? Can you actually do that yourself without anything?
I could not do that by myself. I would have to have a majority of the county commission agree to change the regulations about that.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of progressives, I think, on the county commission now, right? It should be easier, maybe.
Well, we certainly have 2 Democrats on there already. So,
all right, sounds good.
And the hope is we'll have 5 Democrats next year when we come into session in January. So.
Right. All right. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but although I think some of my listeners would be problematic with that. COVID-19 has changed the way politics work. So let's talk a little bit just quickly about that. How you've been campaigning, because it's like you're not even still now, I don't think you could go out and really more than 10 people, I guess. So how are you campaigning? How is that process working for you now?
Well, it's been a very interesting process. We came up with a campaign plan really before the first of the year last fall, and about 8 weeks ago, we just said, well, this isn't going to work. Because it involved a lot of door-to-door, knocking on doors, having meets and greets in neighborhoods, doing fundraising at gatherings. In fact, I think the last event I had like that was over in Peachtree Corners. I had an event back in February, and I think that was about the time the virus hit a week or 2 after that.
Right. That was end of be growing, I think.
That's right. We started shutting things down. So it's really shifted the campaign. We've had to do a lot of telephone work. We're sending out text. We're doing a lot of social media, putting things on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we're sending mailer pieces out.
And you're doing a lot of virtual. I've noticed that you're doing a lot of virtual candidate forums organized, which is pretty good. Organized, like one of them was organized by the Asian American Advocacy Fund, another one by the Gwinnett African American Caucus.
That's correct.
Really niche. I mean, the social media allows you to actually be able to niche down some of these things and reach certain segments of the population better, I think.
Yes, that has been fascinating, and is actually, when you say that, I think the response to some of this has been actually better than you'll get at a public meeting. I know we were in one virtual forum that one of the CID was doing. I think they had 160 some odd people watching at one point. Wow. We had one with the Chamber of Commerce this morning that lasted for about an hour and a half, the commission chair candidates. And they told us they had between 100 and 200 people register for that, and they expected even more to come on that. I actually participated in an NAACP meeting earlier this week by Zoom call. I participated in the Asian American Advocacy Fund forum that you were talking about last week. So I've participated in 4 or 5 of those types of forums, and they've been very well received, and it's been enjoyable for the candidates to get a chance to actually talk with each other and share our views with the public. So.
You know, I think the opportunity, maybe you can't do the door-to-door handshake, which is always the best thing for a politician to be able to do door-to-door, because that's really pulling out that vote and meeting people in person. But you're right. I mean, You probably wouldn't have gotten as many in-person visits to a forum than you can online, because people would be like, I can do that. I'm here. I'm home. Just zone right in there, So maybe it could be good.
That's right. And then you have the same as you do with these. They get posted somewhere and people see them after the fact as well.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting process. But and I mailed in my ballot also. So did that. I think it was last week I mailed the ballot in. And hopefully, 7 million people got it in the state of Georgia, got the application for the absentee ballot. I think 1 million of them responded, which was unusual because I think normally it would be 100,000 or something like that, be a really small number. So it'll be interesting to see how this is going to all pan out and how they're going to be able to count those ballots. So I don't suspect we'll know the winner for a few days.
Well, that'll be interesting. In fact, there's a lawsuit pending I saw just now that was kind of playing off the Wisconsin lawsuit as to whether ballots are going to have to be counted. Do they have to be received by 7 o'clock on election day, or do they just have to be postmarked by election day?
Yes, and that was the question I had. Now, besides the fact that there was no pre-stamped or pre-metered return, which really, I think the state should have done that.
I agree with you. In fact, Stacey Abrams put out a statement about that, and I put out a statement agreeing with her.
Yes, so. It's ridiculous that they did not do that. They printed all those ballot applications and then not do that. That makes no sense to me. But yes, I had the same question. I had the same question of, is it postmarked that day or it has to be there before that day? And what if the post office gets it wrong? I mean, I publish Peachtree Corners magazine, and I can't tell you how sometimes, every once in a while, I'll get someone say, I didn't get that, or I got it 3 weeks later. And it's like, I pay, the rate I pay, it's supposed to be delivered legally and officially within 3 days, not like a week later. So that's what I'm wondering right now.
And I think the Secretary of State contends that the rule is it has to be in the election office by 7 o'clock on election day. The Supreme Court, when they approved the Wisconsin decision that they approved earlier this year, actually allowed a federal judge had said, as long as it was postmarked by the day and it came, then you still had to count it. So that's probably going to be an issue that's going to be argued back and forth between now and election day. This is going to be an interesting election because I do think you're going to have a lot of people voting by mail, which extends it out for the candidates as well. Normally you have a 3-week process where people are early voting.
Right.
Now we have about a 6-week process because, as you say, you've already voted.
Right.
Yet we're still more than just a month or so out from the election. So.
Yeah, which becomes a problem though, because if I voted and let's say the candidate I like someone else now, it's too late. You can't do anything about it. So you really do have to be careful and candidate as long as campaign as long as you can. We've come at the end of our time. So normally what I ask a politician to do is give our audience, ask for the vote, tell them, give me in about a minute or so, and I'll put you on screen by yourself, why they should be voting for you, Lee.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So, first of all, thank you for letting me do this and for having me here today. It's been very nice, and I appreciate it. I would ask for your vote for County Commission Chair because I believe this is an extremely important election. When we come in as a county commission in January of next year, you're going to have 5 county commissioners, and the longest serving county commissioners are going to have 2 years tenure. I believe that it's very important that the person who's in the chairman's position as the leader of that commission has a good and solid understanding of local government and the issues that have to be addressed by local government. I believe I'm that candidate. I've had almost 40 years of experience as a local government attorney representing some of the largest cities in Gwinnett County and representing the Gwinnett County School Board, the largest employer in Gwinnett County. I have a great knowledge of county and city government. I have a knowledge of zoning, which is about 50% of what county commissioners do. And I've done zoning throughout my career for over 30 years. I believe I have the talents and the ability to do the job and to do it well. And I also have a passion for Gwinnett County. I grew up here. I want to see our county prosper. I want to see our county become inclusive. I want to see our county become leaders in regional transportation and doing the types of thing that this county needs to do. And I would appreciate your vote and your support.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Hang in there with me while we sign off. I want to thank everyone for watching Peachtree Corners Life. More podcasts to come. Elections are not over, so I might have another candidate or two from a variety of places. You never know. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there with us, listening to the issues. Make your choices. If you haven't voted yet, you need to do this. 2020 is truly an important year on so many different levels. And if you've been affected by COVID-19, I pray and hope that your family and you and the people you are with, that, that things turn out well. And stay strong. We'll be with you. We're all in this together. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Peachtree Corners Life with Rico Figliolini. You can listen to our live stream on Spreaker every Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. or on demand at iHeartRadio, Spotify, and iTunes. Don't forget to like our Facebook page for notification of our live video streams of the show. Catch our other podcast shows at PeachtreeCornersLife.com.